Welcome, fellow castigators. Last time I endured the episode Space Babies, which featured a monster made out of boogers in a space station that travels by fart. But I am nonetheless committed to watching this series so that you don't have to. Without further ado, The Devil's Chord begins with a boy named Henry Harbinger learning to play the piano. The instructor decides to teach him a set of notes that is rumored to be able to summon Satan himself. Personally, I would simply not. But the instructor plays the Devil's Chord, and the piano slams shut on his hands. From within the piano comes 4 knocks, so the instructor, finally gaining some sense, moves Henry away. Emerging from the piano is not the beautiful fallen angel Lucifer, but a hideous hellbeast with bright orange Krusty the Clown hair and a double chin. This creature introduces himself as Maestro, and then reveals that the child was fake. Henry pops out of existence, leaving behind his clothes for some reason. Maestro proclaims, "I'm them." And the instructor looks confused, so Maestro says, "I am music," which doesn't make any sense. Isn't music an abstract concept? Is Maestro sound waves? Is Maestro biologically made up of consonant tones somehow? Maestro isn't one to explain. But as he plays the piano, visible music notes physically rip themselves out of the instructor, like a cartoon, until he dies. Maestro eats the materialized music notes, which will not be explained, so don't ask. He begins to play the Doctor Who theme on the piano until it transitions into the opening. This will be the first of 1 million fourth wall breaks in this episode. The theme tune finishes on the Doctor's jukebox sitting next to the TARDIS console. Ruby requests a visit to see the Beatles, so the Doctor and Ruby change clothes before landing on Abbey Road in 1963. For those of you fans whose ears perked up at the sound of that date, no, they're not going to do anything with it. That might actually be for the best anyway. The Doctor and Ruby use a T-trolley to get into Abbey Road Studios, which was called EMI Recording Studios until 1976, long after the Beatles broke apart. Luckily, the Fab Four happened to be recording at that very second, and the Doctor and Ruby witnessed them sing a song called My Dog Fred. Note that this is the only scene where George and Ringo have lines. Disappointed by the performance, the Doctor and Ruby take a look around and find that every musician in the studio is playing badly. If you can't figure out why this is happening, then you deserve to be locked in a closet playing goblin music for 24 hours straight. The Doctor and Ruby corner John Lennon and Paul McCartney in the cafeteria, and John sadly says that he just wants to go home. Paul explains that music fell off in the 20s to 30s, and that artists make intentionally bad music now. Why aren't these major timeline changes immediately affecting Ruby's memories like the butterfly did? The Doctor sees Maestro in all the reflections for some reason and dashes off to have a piano installed on the roof. He points out in the distance to where he lives on Totter's Lane with his granddaughter, and I appreciate that they're addressing it. The Doctor tells Ruby that he doesn't know where Susan is because all the Time Lords have gone. First off, Susan was a Gallifreyan, but was not given the ability to regenerate and therefore the title of Time Lady. Secondly, he doesn't remember that he left her in London during the 22nd century. And if I recall correctly, didn't he run into Susan again in a Big Finish story as recently as his 8th incarnation? I would also like to mention that Susan listens to surf rock in the first episode, so I don't think this music grim 1963 could have happened. Anyway, Ruby plays a song on the roof piano that she wrote for her friend Trudy when a girl broke her heart. This summons Maestro, of course, who crawls out of the piano and laughs like Stooky Bill. The Doctor and Ruby run down the stairs to find somewhere to hide, and Maestro dramatically introduces himself again. The Doctor uses the sonic screwdriver to block out sounds, but the Maestro sticks a tuning fork in water, and it shorts out the sonic somehow. Inspired by Ruby's ditty, an old woman in a nearby apartment begins playing Clair de Lune on her piano. This, of course, distracts Maestro, who kills the old woman and then winks at the camera. The Doctor and Ruby make their way back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor says that he is afraid of Maestro because defeating the Toymaker took everything he had and split him in half. Firstly, he beat the Toymaker in a game of hacky sack, so it couldn't have been that difficult. Secondly, it was Unit's laser that split the Doctor in half, and they're not even sure how or why that happened. So I don't think any of that was related to the amount of the Toymaker's power. Anyhow, they return to 2024, where the Earth has become a wasteland without music for some reason. Yet again, this doesn't have an immediate effect on Ruby like the butterfly did. Maestro shows up in Derelict 2024, and the Doctor realizes that he is the son of the Toymaker. He explains that Maestro is the essence of music because the Toymaker is a living game. Firstly, it's interesting that the essence of music would be so ugly and evil, especially if it's so important to the survival of the world. Secondly, the Toymaker was not a living game. He was a strange, eternal being, probably Time Lord, who, in his boredom, used his technological prowess to create a pocket dimension where he could amuse himself by putting his victims through deadly challenges. He was simply a psychopath with a gimmick, like a Batman villain. I don't know why Russell T. Davies saw it fit to change him into an unexplainable being with inestimable magical powers. Anyway, we learn that music makes the Maestro stronger, and that although the Devil's Chord summons him, the right sequence of notes will banish him to wherever. The Doctor and Ruby escape from Maestro and return to 1963, where the Doctor tries to work out the right set of notes on John Lennon's guitar in the sound booth. The soundtrack is playing outside the booth, and the notes materialize to wrap around Ruby's legs and drag her away. The Doctor gives chase and finds her in the orchestra hall, where Maestro is yelling like a Meat Canyon character. Despite Russell not wanting the Sonic to look like a gun, the Doctor points his sonic screwdriver threateningly at Maestro, who just shorts it out again. It begins to snow in the studio, which causes Maestro to drop Ruby for some reason. Maestro challenges the Doctor to a music battle, where it becomes painfully obvious that neither are really playing. Maestro plays the violin unconvincingly, and the Doctor and Ruby play the piano together in order to win. It's funny that the essence of music's weakness was simply two musicians. The Doctor says that he would never call himself a genius, although he literally has before, and begins to play the chord that will banish Maestro. He misses the last note, and Maestro remembers that he can still move, and uses the music to whip the Doctor and banish the piano from the room. In a very weird-looking scene, he traps the Doctor in a drum and Ruby in a cello. Out in the corridor, John Lennon and Paul McCartney just so happen to play the right chord to banish Maestro to wherever, and all the music in the world comes back to life. The Doctor winks into the camera, which begins an incredibly cringy musical number where all the characters sing and dance about like hooligans. Russell needs to stop trying to write songs. He's really not good at it. After a painful few minutes that were obviously just there to fill the runtime, the Doctor and Ruby dance on the crosswalk of Abbey Road like piano keys, and then the episode ends. Wow, Russell T. Davies really knows how to write an episode where hardly anything happens at all. My commenters keep on insisting that he's just warming up, but this is the 6th episode since his return with an incredibly simplistic series of events. Doctor Who used to have things like complicated subplots, engaging new characters, and emotionally catastrophic happenings. In this one, he tries to set up the Doctor's most powerful foe yet, but Maestro is inconsistent, ill-defined, and not particularly interesting. He doesn't even come close to the Daleks, the Master, the Cybermen, the Black Guardian, the meddling monk, or even the Celestial Toymaker himself. Sure, his ill-defined magical powers may technically be more powerful, but the problem is that Maestro isn't shown to be intelligent or cunning. We're not even told what his motivations are. The best thing I can say about Maestro is that he is sufficiently frightening and hideous. That is, right up until you realize how much he looks like Aardman's angry kid. This episode also continues Russell's recent inability to find a way of ending stories. Not only does the Doctor not save the day again, but it all ends with an extremely painful song that comes on suddenly and unceremoniously. I could see why he had troubles finishing off the episode, as there's very little lead up to begin with. The Doctor finds music gone, gets chased by Maestro, and then John and Paul accidentally banish Maestro. The end. What was the point of having the Beatles if you weren't really going to use them anyway? Could you imagine an episode where the Beatles get swept up in a crazy science fiction adventure, bouncing off the Doctor and co. with their different, unique, and quippy personalities? Wouldn't it be great to see the Beatles on an alien world where they intentionally have a hand in saving the day with a big action-packed finale? No, Russell would rather pull them into the story to be sad boys for only a few minutes of screen time. Such wasted potential, which is a good way to sum up this season of Doctor Who so far. For those of you who saw my last video and are wondering, no, the Doctor has still not exhibited any new personality traits or delved deeper into any previously established aspects of the character. Sadly, Ncuti Gatwa is still playing a weak facsimile of the Doctor, and I don't have any hope that Russell will give him more to do than pantomime. Likewise, Ruby has still not been given any character development whatsoever, and is relegated to a cheap Rose stand-in. This is probably one of the biggest offenses, as I think Millie Gibson actually has a lot of potential as a companion. She has a lot of good energy, but unfortunately just fades into the background most of the time. Although, I have to say, her Manchester accent is so strong that it often sounds fake, through no fault of her own, of course. Basically, The Devil's Chord is an uncomplicated, confused, and uninteresting farce that ultimately only proves to be a complete and total waste of time. Considering it earned the worst overnight viewing figures in Doctor Who history, I think the fans are generally with me on this one. If you would like me to continue to watch this ridiculous series so that you don't have to, then you can subscribe and hear from me next week for Boom, which, interestingly, is written by the man who wrote all the most popular episode in RTD's previous time as showrunner, Stephen Moffat himself. I am not going to hold my breath that it will be any good, but nonetheless enter with an open mind. Thanks for listening.
So sad!